Welcome. Today's post is Banana Republic. Published on August 18, 2023. Longtime Hollywood superstar Carmen Miranda died in August of 1955. She was most famous for her hit song, The Lady in the Tutti Frutti Hat. Just 1 month after her death, another, Tutti Frutti, song becomes even more popular, and kickstarts the whole rock and roll genre. So, what does it mean for one, Tutti Frutti, to die, just to have another even more famous one begin right after? Here are the topics we'll be decoding today. You can always find this list in the description below. If you enjoy this video, please press the like button, and subscribe for weekly full-length blog posts, and shorter, more shareable videos. Let's begin. The quickest way to send big comms is to bring back an old famous one. We are doing that again. The advantages are obvious as the intended audience already knows what to expect. Tutti Frutti. E.g. Little Richard's debut hit, Tutti Frutti. Look at the intro to this song. What does this mean? There is no answer to that question without comms. Note how important this song is as well, the foundation of rock and roll. So many things in pop culture are downright nonsensical without comms. If you were comms aware in the 1950s, you'd know right away what it was referencing. Tutti Frutti equals all fruits. The term in the 1940s was tied to Carmen Miranda, who wore giant fruit-themed hats. Literally called, the lady in the Tutti Frutti hat. 1946, Tutti Frutti Carmen Miranda becomes the highest paid entertainer. 1955, Tutti Frutti recorded by Little Richard. Suffice to say, by 1955 the words, Tutti Frutti, would be well defined as a symbol of Carmen Miranda. Having them invoked by Little Richard is to say they are doing that again. In fact, in 1944 her likeness was used for Chiquita Banana, which became an enduring pop culture icon itself. It was arguably the most famous advertising jingle of all time. Played on the radio 376 times a day. Reconcile with Little Richard's equally famous Tutti Frutti. There is a simple reason for Little Richard to invoke Tutti Frutti, and it requires understanding what Carmen Miranda symbolized. Part of the reason isn't a secret as history spells it out, but it is a calm when used by Little Richard. It's also the reason they connect like this. August 5, 1955. Carmen Miranda, Tutti Frutti, death. September 14, 1955, Tutti Frutti Little Richard's breakout hit. The death of the first Tutti Frutti, birth of the next Tutti Frutti. What does it mean for one, Tutti Frutti, to die and another to begin? What does it mean to invoke Carmen Miranda? Carmen Miranda was part of an FDR media push, the Good Neighbor policy. It was an attempt to influence, propaganda, relations between North Americans and Latin Americans. That song and movie, Lady in the Tutti Frutti Hat, was specifically tied to that policy. She became a mainstay of pop culture. Here is one of many testaments to that, as Daffy Duck does another of her famous songs in 1943. The average American became charmed by the push of Carmen Miranda, and thus their views changed. Exactly as intended. She was a living billboard ad. Forcing anyone that likes her or enjoys the catchy music to become hypnotized into a positive view of the differences in culture. Now reconcile this with her sudden death, juxtaposed with the rise of Little Richard. August 5, 1955, Carmen Miranda, Tutti Frutti, death. September 14, 1955, Tutti Frutti breakout hit, Little Richard. Think about the point of a black man at the height of segregation becoming a cultural icon. The very first search results stated this. The audiences would enter the building segregated, and by the end of Little Richard's show, Tutti Frutti, they would all be mixed together. It's now obvious why Little Richard invoked Tutti Frutti, as they wanted to do the same thing. Lyrics of Tutti Frutti, rock to the east, rock to the west, nationwide, she's the gal I love best. Carmen Miranda's death was likely a signal to shift resources. Think about it. That jingle tied to Carmen Miranda was played hundreds of times a day on radio. That's a lot of resources, and so when we reconcile all of that moving to Little Richard and the next generation, it fits for the culture shift. The point is that there was an effort to end the negative associations people had with blacks. Consider where race relations are now with the media. Pity the media can't just view people as equal, but my point is that these culture shifts are coordinated. The fact that almost every black used to be a Republican and is now a Democrat is one of many reasons for what we see today, but I'm leaving out a crucial element of all this. There are rabbit holes connected to this that are far deeper and darker. International ducks. It's easy to say the media can push a viewpoint on masses of people, but how do they control leaders of those masses? When Muhammad Ali becomes a pusher on culture, who controls Muhammad Ali? I'll answer that question with a better question. Why use Daffy Duck to symbolize Carmen Miranda? Duck is a symbol of ducking the consequences of some action. Bananas are the most phallic fruit, but what does that and a duck have to do with international relations? August 5, 1955, Tutti Frutti, Carmen Miranda death. September 14, 1955, Tutti Frutti Little Richard's breakout hit recorded. September 15, 1955, Lolita, story about a man lusting over a sedated child in a hotel. Duck. Don't forget the other word for Richard in relation to these facts. It suggests a level of blackmail was used as a means of how they accomplished takeovers of countries/communities through local leaders. Yeah, the Epstein Virgin Island thing. Not new. Even more interesting. April 17, 1937, Daffy Duck debut 17 = Q = secret. April 18, 1937, Sally Horner born Lolita inspiration according to some sources. Often what we see in the media is a calm representing something real going on behind the scenes. Which is to say, if it was a message, then it would make sense to time the famous duck to it. Both were sending comms about a similar thing, not necessarily with similar intents. Keep in mind when I say, both were sending comms, I'm not saying they literally timed her birth, I'm saying that when it came time to write a story in the news about child predators, they had the ability to pick whatever date they wanted for the birth date. The book was written by a Russian. February 4, 1945, Big Three of the World meet at Yalta. February 3, 1945, Three Caballeros, Disney's 7th animated feature film released. 1. Donald Duck, U.S. Navy outfit, equals USA. 2. Cigar-smoking bird, Churchill famously chain smoker, equals UK. 3. Red bird equals Russia, red equals Russia. This specific production was produced through an office created by FDR. Know who was in that Three Caballeros film that Donald Duck lusted over? He lusted over many, but the most prominent one. Aurora Miranda, sister of the inspiration for Chiquita Banana in Three Caballeros. After Miranda, it follows kids finding shelter, and after finding a hotel is the section where the duck tries to get with as many women as possible. The whole film begins with Donald Duck getting home movie gifts which he plays on his butt initially. If someone is up your butt, what does it mean? The point is getting into your secrets. Let's back up. The blackmail is something I go over too frequently, so let's focus on the culture shift instead. The PG reason in tax funding the Tutti Frutti push by Franklin Roosevelt was to reverse the trend of outrage against Americans abroad. The origins are tied to Teddy Roosevelt. The point in the push was likely to mitigate the risks of losing banana republics in revolutions. That is to say, countries controlled in all but name by companies like Chiquita. Thus it's time to cover the history and comms of banana republics. Banana republics and J.P. Morgan. The Secretary of State Foster Dulles and CIA head during MK Ultra alien Dulles were brothers, and both Dulles brothers tie into United Fruit banana republics. Negotiating the land giveaways and other legal work. Interesting to consider the relationship between Secretary of State, international diplomacy, and CIA, international espionage, with these two as literal brothers. Moreover, their legal firm has its roots back with J.P. Morgan. Their firm was directly involved with the Guatemala Banana Republic coup. This tells us that J.P. Morgan and by extension Rothschild, based on past digs. Yet another J.P. Morgan connection is the guy who ran the precursor to the CIA. Will Bill, the father of the CIA, and his most notable work before FDR was for J.P. Morgan gathering intelligence internationally. Therefore the bank laid some but not all of the groundwork. The CIA's father was, coincidentally, a classmate of FDR. FDR selected him to go to Britain, and he obtained classified access. The intent was to copy and paste the British intelligence service. Even before being selected by FDR he was already a celebrity. A Warner Brothers puff piece was made about his war history. In the film the main character, and thus the audience, is shamed and inspired by just how much more heroic Donovan is than they are. Interesting to see the CIA origins tie into Hollywood like this. I've decoded FDR as a Fed Reserve comm. He is the one who authorized the Fed to issue banknotes. He also made it illegal to have gold and forced its surrender. This is the origin of Fort Knox and how it came to house most of the gold. 1932, just a year before Franklin Roosevelt, it was named Fort Knox, and given how many other things were prepped for him, I bet this was as well. A key opponent, Franklin Roosevelt, had been Franklin Knox, who despite supporting Teddy Roosevelt in 1912 ran against FDR in 1936. This looks like another situation where the opponent isn't really an opponent but filling a role so nobody else actually serious about running steps up for it. After playing that role he became FDR's Secretary of the Navy. I'm not sure the symbolism of Knox, though. I just recognize the oddity of this guy so tied to both Roosevelts sharing the name of FDR's new gold chest. I doubt it's coincidence, but that doesn't mean I can answer what it means. What is clear, however, is the CIA began. But let's get into the origins. Teddy Roosevelt was a leading figure for the U.S. during the Spanish-American War. The Rough Riders. After victory in 1898, Spain transferred control of Puerto Rico, Guam and the Philippine Islands to America for $20 million. They became banana republics. Spanish-American War hero Teddy Roosevelt was made president in 1901 after a sudden assassination months after replacing the VP after his sudden death. I've often talked about how fishy these two deaths are, and this week I learned a deeper level to it. The United Fruit Company obtained the ships used in the Spanish-American War to create its own private navy, the Great White Fleet. In 1901, Spanish-American War leader Teddy Roosevelt renamed the Executive Mansion the White House. He also installed the famous owl. Teddy Roosevelt's famous Rough Riders image was based on the Buffalo Bill show, which had the same name. Effectively, he was co-opting a Hollywood image of the day. Notice the global fame of Buffalo Bill was tied to a World Fair in 1893. This is important because McKinley died while inaugurating the Buffalo World Fair in 1901. Buffalo World Fair/World Fair. Notice the logo used showing South America reaching up to North America at the Panama Canal. The very thing Teddy would force into being by committing the country to it. There's a good chance he is another death, especially given the song used for the event. Put me off at Buffalo. Throw me off there dead or alive. Buffalo itself is used as a term to define intimidation and forcing someone to move. Which I think is what happened. Banana republics do predate 1898, but the term itself was coined in 1904 to describe what the US-based companies had done to Honduras. The book's title, Cabbages and Kings, was inspired by Alice in Wonderland's The Walrus and the Carpenter. The inspiration for the assassination of McKinley was said to be the assassination of the King of Italy. July 28, 1900. Wizard of Oz and Navy Alphabet request copyright. July 29, 1900. King of Italy assassinated. August 1, 1900. Wizard of Oz copyright registered alongside Navy Alphabet. In 1900, J.P. Morgan was the big bank. Note the Wizard of Oz is played by a Morgan in the most famous version. His mortal enemy is the Wicked Witch of the West played by Hamilton. The origin of J.P. Morgan Bank traces itself back to Aaron Burr's Manhattan Company. Burr scammed the U.S. for a charter to clean water and then built a bank with it instead. Burr infamously killed the original Hamilton, the first Secretary of Treasury for the USA. He then had to evade arrest by Thomas Jefferson as he was said to plot the overthrow of the country. This was exposed to Jefferson in a coded letter. I am not only uninformed of the prime mover and ultimate objects of this enterprise, but am ignorant of the foundation. Given what we know about J.P. Morgan and the Rothschilds, it seems likely they would be the prime mover, with the Morgan Bank being the American foundation for it. This all ties into the yellow brick road. I go over the yellow brick road here. A yellow brick is gold. Thus, farewell yellow bricks is asserting that some kind of money is about to be spent. Reconcile with the timetables. September 8, 2018. Farewell Yellow Brick Road Tour begins in Allentown. September 9, 2018. Al-Walid's ex-wife marries another billionaire. Al-Walid was a billionaire, but after a secret agreement with the government, he was dropped from the list of billionaires due to a lack of information. What happened to the money? Check the post if you haven't read it, but the point for this post that matters is that the symbolism of the yellow brick road is massive amounts of gold. Timing of publishing was timed to the creation of banana republics. Gold Brick Road leads to Emerald City. April 19, 1956. Federal Aid Highway Act introduced. April 19, 1956. Emerald Ring of Grace Kelly, Wedding of the Century. Emerald green is a symbol for U.S. currency. But there's a lot more to that book than just that. March 30, 1899. UFC, United Fruit Company. May 14, 1900. Gold standard requiring U.S. Treasury to redeem on-demand gold coin. September 6, 1900. Dow Jones closed above 100 for the first time. September 1, 1900. Wizard of Oz publication. September 2, 1900. Telegraph between Germany and U.S. begins. Telegraph being the symbol for Tin Man. This is why, clicking the shoes, let her go home. The original shoes are silver. September 1, 1900. Wizard of Oz published. September 2, 1900. Telegraph between Germany and U.S. begins. Telegraph symbolism being how you get home by clicking silver, i.e. the tap of a telegraph to talk over long distances. I highlight the German connection because May 6, 1919, death of Wizard of Oz writer Lyman Baum. May 7, 1919, Treaty of Versailles forcing massive payments of Germany which leads to World War II. Maybe coincidence, but it was a global tragedy and scam, and so is what was going on with banana republics. Morgan was deep into the banana republic scams. The Wizard of Oz with Hamilton as the villain and Morgan as newly installed leader of a country of munchkins in Emerald City. Sounds like what Morgan was doing with banana republics, but who was Dorothy? The most famous version had Judy Garland, who originally known as part of an act called the Gum Sisters. Gum coms are about blowing bubbles. The kinds of things that burst and create depressions. Which is probably why if we reconcile bubble gum history. 1906 first bubble gum fails and is not released. 1907 bubble burst banking panic fixed by J.P. Morgan approved by Roosevelt leads to Fed. 1928 bubble gum invented by an accountant accident. 1929 bubble burst Great Depression begins due to Fed and FDR gets elected due to it. Morgan being the man behind the curtain likely symbolized the movie industry. Coordinating ops with bankrolling. Giving gifts of awards, diplomas, grants, and testimonials, mainstream media support, all being things big money could furnish people who take part in ops with. Dorothy with Toto being exactly that. Notice she gets an apple just before tapping on Tin Man, telegraph tap equals Morse code. The Wicked Witch played by Hamilton wanting to take Toto. The representation of the op itself. What kind of ops? Well, this is why they changed the silver telegraph com into red shoes. They originally had Shirley Temple in mind for the role. This is also tied to banana republics because the leaders of such things are likely blackmailed. After the Wicked Witch, played by Hamilton, tries to take the dog, she meets Morgan by a traveling, crowned heads of Europe tied to pyramids of Egypt. He sneaks a look at her concealed photographs to tell her fortune with his crystal, and her dog eats his hot dog. These ops are likely why the Wizard of Oz story was changed from fantasy into a dream sequence. Sedation comms. This brings us back to Teddy Roosevelt because I've decoded those kinds of comms tied to him more than any other politician in history. November 1902, Peter Pan original story. November 1902, Teddy Roosevelt origin of Teddy Bear. The Lullaby League and Lollipop Guild dance for her. They will glorify her name for removing the witch and taking her red shoes. The primary conflict being over the red shoes, which hold all the power. The witch is defeated by the red shoe-wearing Dorothy Gale. By throwing water on her. Gale equals audio/speaking. Banana slip. September 2, 1901, Teddy Roosevelt big stick diplomacy established. Big stick equals baseball bat. September 5, 1901, minor league baseball founded. September 6, 1901, assassination of William McKinley. The big stick policy is what is attributed to creating banana republics. Baseball to coordinate. Even before Teddy Roosevelt became president, he was chief of police and started a war on the banana skin in 1896. So, people falling on discarded banana skins warranted a declaration of war. Banana peel slipping is a fairly common pratfall in comedy. Quite possibly the most common one. That usually means there's a com to it. The origin of banana peel slipping was attributed to Billy Watson, 1899. Watson, around that time, was a com tied to new telephone surveillance. The very first banana ever shown to the public was alongside the first phone at the World Fair June 1876. This phone connection is strong as I found many more examples, but it's not the full answer. Here are a few more examples. The famous sliding matrix phone was called a banana, so that connects sliding and bananas again. That phone had a surprisingly large pop culture impact. Other examples I quickly found in the image, but as I said, it's not the full answer. I think the root symbol for banana is tied to the takeovers, as it became tied to literally taking over third world countries from the very beginning. Thus comms about slipping on a banana peel tied to phone surveillance fits. Defining players in the takeover incriminating themselves over the phone. Slipping on a banana peel. Which is probably why in 1896 Teddy Roosevelt as police commissioner waged a war on banana peels. Relevant to Teddy plus bananas is another famous catchy banana song is from an Australian kids show that ran for 6 years. Song dictates wearing sleepwear and chasing teddy bears, hoping to catch them unaware. The villain is a rat and the ally Teddy is Morgan. Could be coincidence, but how does one become a top banana? Morgan and the next Hamilton. The answer is giving the J.P. Morgans of the world strings. Once they have strings, they can feel confident the puppet will do as they wish and can place them in a place of power. The war is easiest to categorize with Rothschild central banks as villains. They are the most consistent power. The ones both Roosevelts fought for. E.g. when Andrew Jackson threatened banks, a third party tied to Morgan appeared to kill his votes. A frenzy claiming assassination on Morgan to draw people into an anti-Masonic faction. Which by blocking Jackson would have had the effect of protecting the Rothschild banks. If it had not been a Rothschild/Morgan story, it could never have spread. It's ironic to save a cult by claiming to get rid of one, but it's meant to go over the head of the populace. We need to get educated. Some points I can be confident of. Like when Andrew Jackson and Hamilton fought the banks, he was going against the Rothschild machine. Interestingly, the son of Hamilton fought with Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was POTUS 1829-1837. In 1851, at age 63, Hamilton made international news as the first international sports hero of all things. August 22, 1851. Alexander Hamilton's son wins the first America Cup, oldest international competition still running. Congratulated by Queen Victoria. August 22, 1851. Goldfields discovered Australia, name changes to Victoria. I'm looking at this as a possible origin point of international cooperation in the seas. I've long wondered when precisely the transition happened between clear anti-Rothschild Andrew Jackson faction and pro-Rothschild Teddy Roosevelt. I used to view it as a takeover in 1901, but it's clear the work done helping Britain in various hot spots around the world long predated. Having the son of Hamilton at 63 years old win an international race given Britain was synonymous with naval power is no accident. Hamilton was the very symbol of opposition to the banking exuded by the ones long in control of Britain. It has extra meaning because Hamilton himself was killed by the founder of what would become J.P. Morgan. If I'm reading this right, I understand this decision. It's cooperating with the most powerful to protect the homeland. Help evil do evil in exchange for no evil done to you. Horrible truth of the world, and it's one of many reasons why that truth needs to get out, so people can stop the cycle. People die all the time and nobody notices, but a narrative is carefully grown in media to get people to follow. It's why we need to stop being sheep and learn ASAP. Anyway. Banana symbolism tied to surveillance and being taped may answer the question of why 3 people paid over $100,000 each in recent years to buy a duct-taped banana. Possibly a symbol for intentionally being caught on tape doing something illegal. Why would they do that? Just a hypothesis for the moment, but it was 2019 and people were being flipped, and I know some of the ops are tied to people acting illegally for a duck on more serious charges. Effectively, they were acting as puppets to help strengthen cases going on right now against otherwise invulnerable people. Also, another of his works being the Pope hit by a meteor. I'll probably decode that next time I go through space comms. I began this decode on bananas due to a reader request about news stories about banana diseases. Gros Michel and the Panama disease. How the world's favorite banana became extinct. The Gros Michel banana used to be as ubiquitous as its replacement, the Cavendish, is today. Learn why it became practically extinct and the likelihood of the same thing happening to the Cavendish. The banana killer is called Panama disease and first appeared in Panama in 1903. This is the same year the Panama Canal construction began as well as the Panama Revolt. Panama Canal was the key to fast global shipping, which bananas require more than any other fruit. I spent many hours digging into this disease and found the most vague dating of any history I've ever encountered. The closest I can find when the disease hit any specific country is generalized to a year. And often it's even more vague, giving a decade instead. We are talking about billions and control of countries, so it's fishy that nobody anywhere bothered to catalog things any closer than a full decade. My go-to technique involves building timelines and comparing news happening that week. Obviously, this made decoding difficult. Difficult but not impossible, because this was extremely fishy. Why would they do this? So, as stated, that the Panama disease was discovered in Panama alongside the Panama Revolt and the start of the Panama Canal. That gives us a clue. I was able to find NYT articles about it, no dates given, but the reporting date is still important. Note news about United Fruit destroying diseased banana crops in Guatemala with floods. It was within a month of when CIA installed President of Guatemala was assassinated. I believe for the most part this disease was used as an excuse, used as leverage for control. They can't say the truth about the oppression inflicted on natives, so a code word of disease is used to define when their plantations are in trouble from workers' revolts. NYT reporting a solution to the disease in 1933. The same year Franklin Roosevelt began and announced his good neighbor policy to be more friendly to Latin America. To stop forcing military interventions and instead cooperate. This finally fully unlocks King Kong. A movie I never fully decoded, but in this context it becomes clear. March 2, 1933, King Kong, New York. March 4, 1933, inauguration FDR Governor of New York as POTUS. This is a movie about the USA controlling the leader of a third world country. King Kong is portrayed as the leader who gets young women offered to him. Kidnapped by the Americans as it was hypnotized by a pretty and eventually killed at the top of the Empire State Building. The symbolism with "good neighbor" is an end to the strong-arm tactics. Banana disease cure. The origin of King Kong was a pornographic film in Gagi, where women were given to gorillas as sex slaves. March 15, 1930, Ngagi exploitation film released. March 17, 1930, Empire State Building construction began in Gotham. Remember, King Kong climbs the Empire State Building. It also explains the Lindbergh kidnapping as well, as Lindbergh was tied into the blackmail comms. March 2, 1932, Lindbergh kidnapping. March 2, 1933, King Kong, New York. March 4, 1933, inauguration FDR Governor of New York as POTUS. Blackmail changing hands. Which means October 14, 1926, NYT, Panama disease cure seeking. October 14, 1926, Winnie the Pooh teddy bear book. Symbol tied to Teddy Roosevelt ops, the cure in controlling the head of a country. Which is why it's presented that way in King Kong. June 6, 1957, United Fruit pits flood against disease. June 11, 1957, Elvis Presley, Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear. June 10, 1957, Tom Terrific first shown CBS Studio 54, the one that becomes a 1977 celeb sex dungeon. Tom Terrific was the nickname of JFK's cat. Teddy Bear song is a rabbit hole. January 22, 1957, Elvis Presley Records, Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear. January 22, 1957, Grimes sisters aged 12 and 15 nude bodies discovered, shatters the innocence of Chicago. 01//22-1957, first ever pre-recorded videotape shown for subsequent airing. Remember, this was the same month the United Fruit Company CIA installed president of Guatemala was assassinated. Note the lyrics by the king. Let me be your loving teddy bear. Put a chain around my neck. Lead me anywhere. So for the most part that disease is a symbol of uprising. Leverage, as well as the fruit company can destroy its crops without any scrutiny about conditions. It forces the government to keep the people in line or else lose the only profit. Though it's called Panama disease, it actually goes back further than 1903. The discovery in Australia in 1876. Note skirmishes with natives illustrated the same year. Gros Michel Cavendish. One key date is the changing of the Gros Michel, called Big Mike, for the Cavendish in the 1950s. Gros mic as in gross microphone. A symbol for the ugliness of the occupation and changes made to it. After all, the companies didn't get kicked out, but they did change. So they changed gross microphone for Cavendish, which we all eat today. There is a character in the most popular show in Japan called Cavendish, obsessed with being popular. Banana color and shape hair as well. Women try to attach themselves to him, and he has a split personality that murders anyone nearby anytime he falls asleep. Which, given what we've been talking about in those countries, does fit. Trying to get media attention to promote him. But that's enough about him. There's at least one more thing to discuss tied to these banana comms. So I talked about King Kong as the king of a third world in his pursuits of young women. King Kong takes the clothes off the young girl in this scene. Well, this also unlocks another media property I've long tried to decode. This is a video going over Donkey Kong Country as an allegory for the American Banana War. It's a sequel to a video he made going over the 1986 Adventure Island game as tied to the same practices in the Philippines. There are motives in these videos to push a perspective more than decode. In fact, he highlights his initials, GT, as a reference to Grand Theft Auto, stealing that driving, but the basic hypothesis presented may still be correct. And if that hypothesis is correct, then those games were calling out the USA as trying to monopolize an industry. This has a great meaning in relation to Donkey Kong, as it was what put Nintendo on the map. The company that took the American Atari's position in the industry. Invoking the symbol of King Kong was therefore a way to convey America shouldn't dominate business with Atari. This is most clear with Adventure Island. You play as an American boy called Master Higgins wearing a baseball cap. The unique gimmick of the game has your character constantly eat fruits to stay alive. Master equals slave owner. Third world country plus American plus constantly eating their fruit. Given the location is what amounts to a banana plantation country. The symbol of an American constantly eating their fruit. The journey to take over. Also the fact it was 1986 makes it stronger, a transitional year for the West away from games. The banana disease appears to be a symbol of the risk of losing control over areas. This can happen through revolution or losing leader installed. Perhaps blackmail is employed, but it doesn't always hold. I was able to find just one non-vague date for disease discovery. August 12, 2019, banana fungus arrives in Latin America. August 12, 2019, Epstein death shifts focus to Maxwell. By itself this means little, but with a few more dates. September 17, 2019, Indonesia raises the female marriage age to 19, COVID-19, to curb child marriages. September 17, 2019, North Korea abduction victims turn up in Japan, 17 total. October 18, 2019, Wuhan, China military games. November 17, 2019, COVID-19 pandemic begins in Wuhan. October 18, 2019, Wuhan, China military games. November 17, 2019, Wuhan COVID-19 pandemic begins. November 17, 2019, Trump defends Joe Biden to Kim Jong-un that sleepy Joe Biden is somewhat better than a rabid dog. For the rest of this post I'm going to include some cat decodes I added after posting to my last one. I added these days after the post, so I'm sure most readers didn't notice them. Extra Section 1, Embassy Cat. Here's an easy comm to identify but not necessarily easy to decode. Or at least it will be obvious in meaning when contrasted with one other story. April 11, 2019, Julian Assange arrested and off to court after 7 years in embassy with cat as only companion. April 12, 2019, Julian Assange's embassy cat reported missing. April 12, 2019, complaint filed against famous cat Miska Bellevue's most persecuted tabby cat now seeks her day in court pursued by Mueller. The cat part of the symbol is obvious. But even if we know the symbol, that doesn't mean we can decode the entire story with just that. Have to study the articles and reconcile history to get it. The Mueller mention in the article as a long-time pursuer is particularly interesting. It's an absurdly long article for a simple cat story, but then I suppose this is a complicated situation. Mueller had a dog comm assigned to him. September 4, 2001, Mueller FBI Director. September 4, 2013, Comey FBI Director. June 21, 2013, Obama nominates Comey to replace Mueller as head of the FBI. July 21, 2013, Mueller two-dog assumes mayor role in California. But that last part is irrelevant to the comm in question. I just wanted to show how common this is. Focus on the simple things that can be picked up and reconcile with history. You know who Mueller is, you know who Assange is, you know what a cat comm is. What is being said? A few things that jumped out at me. April 11, 2019, Assange arrest. April 12, 2019. Miska DC cat complaint filed. March 22, 2019. Mueller special counsel ends. Plus 1 month. April 22, 2019. Reported, Miska DC cat persecuted by Mueller seeks day in court. Especially the timing on Mueller. The special counsel was supposed to remove Trump, built up for years, but instead ended with a win for him. This is because Mueller flipped, and it explains the details in the report about Mueller going after the cat. Cat equals seeing in darkness, so it's a symbol for Assange as an op. The case against Trump was tied to WikiLeaks getting HRC emails, which is what helped Trump win. The DNC hack by Russia was critical to the case. Cat is named Miska, Russian, Michael, equals microphone com. The story was timed exactly to the 1-month anniversary of Mueller to update what was going on with Assange. They even used the exact date of his arrest as the date the complaint against the cat was filed. As for conclusions, it points out for now it's in legal limbo. So it's asserting that they aren't sure what will happen. Of course, with as much time that has passed, there was a conclusion. May 4, 2022. Owner of Miska, the notorious Bellevue, Washington cat, wins $125,000 settlement. Owner of Miska, the notorious Bellevue cat, wins $125,000 settlement. Dating back to 2014, Regional Animal Services of King County, contracted by the city of Bellevue, issued violations for claims that Miska trespassed, taunted other pets in the neighborhood and commit. A conclusion like that likely means there was good news for Assange around that timeframe. So I look at what was reported then. Yes, one huge positive piece of news for that case hit that day. Durham. Judge decided to look at Clinton evidence. Looking at the evidence hidden by Clinton privilege is the win for Assange. Either that or there was other news I didn't find, but this case is tied to Assange and this was big news for it. So it'd be a huge coincidence if not. Interestingly, that's the same day as this case. May 4, 2023, Miska wins case. May 4, 2023, Murdaugh, 2 others indicted. I already decoded that Murdaugh trial as a comms vehicle, but I had not been able to pin down the precise meaning. Alex Murdaugh, 2 others indicted on additional charges. A South Carolina grand jury issued 3 indictments against suspended Lowcountry attorney Alex Murdaugh and 2 others Wednesday. I go over it here, and while there are great conclusions in that post, I never came to a strong conclusion on that one. I'll dig into it later. Next up, some of the other cat comms. These I added to the cat post days after posting, but as most readers get into posts the first few days, I assume most didn't read it. So I'll share it with this new post to make sure of it. HADJI decoded. This was a request I got years ago and never could solve it. April 7, 2021. Keith Hernandez's funny cat, emergency, tale leads into Mets' first home run of season. Now I have cat as a symbol solved, but it's not enough just to know that symbol. To decode this, I have to decode Keith Hernandez and then reconcile the cat comms. Keith Hernandez is most known in pop culture for his guest role on Seinfeld. When decoding, it's important to pay attention to patterns. Keith is number 17 and played 17 years in the MLB. The episode is the 17th and deals with Q/17 plot line parodying JFK conspiracy theories. Specifically dealing with the true shooter and mistaken identities. Not just 17. Episode ranked 4th best episode of all time by TV Guide. Jerry Seinfeld commentated on 4 innings of a Mets game tied to this episode. Hernandez was the 4th number ever retired by the Mets. His cat HADJI is 4 generations removed from an Asian tree leopard and interrupted the 4th inning of a baseball game. He has the most famous mustache in baseball history. Mustache comms vary depending on the type, but the most common version I've seen is to hide the nose/nose. When combined with other patterns, his use as a symbol becomes clear. September 26, 2012. Top music channel on YouTube, your favorite Martian disbands. September 27, 2012. Keith Hernandez shaves off famous mustache. Martian symbolism is for foreign agents. His accent and name, Hernandez, give a misconception about his background. His nickname was even Mex. February 12, 1992. Keith Hernandez, world-famous mustache, Seinfeld, the boyfriend, mistaken identity conspiracy President JFK. February 13, 1992. Simpsons, the lover, mistaken identity plot with President Woodrow, next episode equals pro baseball. President/president. Boyfriend/lover. Baseball/baseball. Mistaken identity/mistaken identity. Mustache/mustache. The B-story plot involved a bet with Ned Flanders shaving off his mustache. People think you are hiding something. The quick answer is #17/Q. Keith Hernandez symbolizes a hidden identity. His most famous baseball moment was 1986 World Series. I go over 1986 a lot. Know what happened during the 1986 World Series. October 18, 1986. U.S. World Series. October 18, 1986. Japan Series baseball begins. October 27, 1986. U.S. World Series ends on Game 6. October 27, 1986. Japan Series ends on Game 7. Same time. After checking a number of other years, it doesn't overlap in other years, only this one. Coordination and timing equals message about changes going on with tech and data. The shift to Japan from Russia mirroring. November 13, 1989. Keith Hernandez granted free agency. November 13, 1989. Judge rules Nintendo owns home rights to Tetris. Symbol here with Keith gaining free agency connects to cells tied to USSR gaining the same. November 1989. Fall of the Russian-built Berlin Wall. November 1989. Tetris released Russian game about walls game published originally by Robert Maxwell. His cat's name, HADJI, is from the Indian adopted orphan boy on Johnny Quest. Another symbol for foreign agent smuggling. September 18, 1964. Johnny Quest. September 21, 1964. Malta becomes independent. September 22, 1964. The man from UNCLE origin of Mission Impossible. All of this gives us what we need to decode HADJI. April 6, 2021. Keith Hernandez cat emergency overshadows Mets first homer of season. April 6, 2021. Army sergeant hiding identity needs help bringing rescued cat to USA. Compare these two stories, the meaning becomes clear. The interruption at the home run was to bring attention ASAP in the need to help an agent in need. Keith Hernandez cat emergency, key jammed in the door and I am not sure I'll be able to get in my house tonight. Contrast with the military story. Military desperate to bring a hurt cat and avoid legal reprisal from the military while doing it. Story is telegraphing everything I've said about the symbolism. The more comms repeat the same message equals the louder the message. His catchphrase, "I'm Keith Hernandez," plays into the symbolism of a mistaken identity. Since the point of the name is misidentifying the person. Who does this guy think he is? Because remember he's not Mexican, he's Scots-Irish, and yet his nickname was Mex due to his last name. I also notice his first Instagram post was about his dog, Duncan. That Simpsons episode tied to him involved a yo-yo craze which kicks off the entire plot. I get the feeling if I dig here I might unlock yo-yo comms, but that'll be a dig for another day. One last cat decode added after the post. Kitty and cat. Going back to the Hello Kitty connection. 1975, Hello Kitty introduced as coin purse. 1975, Takubin, top home delivery in Japan proposed and developed. Now that may not seem like a strong connection, until you look at their logo and history closely. An adult cat carrying a child cat. As recognizable in Japan as Coca-Cola is in the USA. Reconcile the popularity of Hello Kitty as the second highest-selling media franchise by sales. Black Kitten Delivery / White Cat No Mouth to Talk. The fact they launched a prototype, Q, just before 1977 is interesting. So, is their endorsement of Kiki's delivery service? A movie about a little witch and her black cat. When I looked into this I found a curious connection. 1989, Kiki's Delivery Service, big-budget cartoon film Little Girl with Talking Pet leaving home and meets Ursula, hero. 1989, Little Mermaid, big-budget cartoon film with Little Girl with Talking Pet leaving home and meets Ursula, villain. I don't think Ursula is a common name for these two movies that already shared attributes like both being famous animated movies about little girls leaving home. Studio Ghibli is basically the Disney of Japan and Little Mermaid is the start of the Disney Renaissance, as it's called. I'm not sure what to make of this fully, but I think both films were tied to new ops related to computers. October 10, 1961, Little Mermaid voice born. October 10, 1961, MLB second expansion draft. New teams representing a new push. I suspect there was some kind of radio-to-computer transition for ops tied to young girls. A few reasons for that. One being I've decoded ops prior to computers as being primarily ham radios. And the computer boom hit Japan in 1985, same year the book they built the movie off of was released. Movie starts with radio listening and the protagonist wanting to leave to her witch duty early on a perfect full moon rather than planned date. Symbol of hearing new ops and moving towards being a part of them. Something comms-aware people would have a coming of age for. A major reason computers went mainstream was the transition into GUI-based computers, as in not text-based DOS but allowing visual design. The first of which was the Lisa system by Macintosh. I mention this for two reasons. Lisa was the voice for Kiki for foreign audiences. Last name, microphone, plus son, as in Next Generation. Moreover, 1985 the book hit, same year the computer boom hit Japan. i.e. when average comms-aware people upgraded their ability to send comms with computers. Another reason, and perhaps far more telling, is the fact that in Kiki a plot element is her use of her father's radio. And then she is asked to turn it off. Later she loses her ability to hear her cat as well as her magic, but eventually finds a new inspiration, allowing her to hear again. Being able to hear her cat is a representation of magic itself. Climax of movie is her having moved to a new land and rescuing a boy from a Hindenburg-style crash into symbol of Big Ben. This is how she gets her ability to fly again. That is a symbol likely tied to the 1980s tech transition from west to east I often decode. The data ops moved to prevent leaks. Though to back up a bit. What exactly is she symbolizing in delivering? Well, just before getting her first delivery she laments running out of money and looks at expensive, red shoes, in the window. Red shoes is a symbol Q went over once. But that doesn't mean red shoes always equals perversion, as comms are all contextual. The symbol is a little more nuanced. Symbol of a ticket to ops and rewards that come with it. Not necessarily sex, but that is something some ops could tie to. The moral part of the story is about being spoiled, as in after getting wealth and power due to their ticket they ruin it. So Big Ben was used as a symbol. 1862 Alice in Wonderland inspired by children date on boat ride. 1862 Big Ben begins keeping time, symbol of keeping a record of actions, i.e. blackmail. Big Ben is especially tied to Peter Pan. November 1902, Peter Pan original story. November 1902, Teddy Roosevelt origin of teddy bear. This is especially fitting for Japan given the history. He literally had a judo master, but that's in other posts. Anyway, in the original Red Shoe story, after she gets red shoes she is adopted. Just like how right after Kiki talks of being poor and getting red shoes she gets her first job. What she is given to deliver is herself. Or an identical cat to her own. She loses the doll on the way, and so she has to have her cat act as though it's a doll, kind of like if it were sedated. All while Kiki's new friend Ursula uses a needle and strings to fix the stuffed cat Ursula. Puppetry calms. The family dog secretly cooperates with the cat to make the switch. She then talks about how Ursula wants to draw her picture, and the cat jokes about it being a picture of her nude. Remember, she's 13. I skipped over a transition because it makes more sense after hearing that last bit. Note when she gets the delivery with the cat between her legs, she makes a special note to fly high enough so as to not get caught by the police. When I brought some of my initial findings to my readers, one dug deeper. I do have a hypothesis on this connection, but I need to spend more time on it before sharing. Clearly there's something here. Some kind of comm being sent by both companies with different perspectives on it. You can tell from this the enormous progress my students are making. I didn't make that collage, or this one. Another, Ursula, a reader dug up. I didn't do this research. This is someone taking my methods and pushing into new territories. It's awesome. Even so, I'm not actually sure what to make of it. They've identified a fascinating pattern tied to shells and voices in relation to Ursula. One more from them. Okay. This is a good place to end the post as it demonstrates just how far people have come. In fact, I got sent a link to a person decoding symbolism online just like I am not too long ago. Though I haven't had the time to dig into more than a couple of his posts. Still, this is a great sign. I have quite a few threads that'll become posts soon. I know most people want news updates, and that's this post. I also have this brand new thread which has a few updates in it as well. Both threads are massive and just need a bit of editing to become posts. I know I don't do a good job editing, but in time I plan on improving that. I'm not trying to get people to go to Twitter instead of the blog is definitely the place to read my work in a better state, but I know many people want updates, so I felt I should provide that. Telegram chat. Join the Decoding Telegram group. This has been Banana Republic.